Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Alchemy Lab. My name is Matt. I will be your alchemist this evening. And I am here with indie author, Iron Age author, Mr. James Krake. Hello, James.
Hello, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's good to have you, man. It's good to have you. It's one of those where I've read the material in question, which
Which
is
I'm
good.
flattered.
Yeah, sometimes I don't get the time, but this time I have gotten the time. Talking of material in question, for those of you out there who don't know who James is, James, who are you and what do you do?
I'm an independent author that typically publishes sci-fi, but we're actually talking about my latest book today, mostly, which is a novel called 5 to 4. It is sort of a supernatural suspense kind of deal. Bunch of office workers, an event happens at the end of the first chapter, and they find themselves in a nightmare version of their office with no way out. All the doors have been scrambled, they can't find the way out, and there are monsters afoot.
Mm-hmm.
It's a nice, short little story. It's technically a novella. I had a lot of fun writing that. I was part of an event with my critique partners, and I got that out. It's a little different from my usual cyberpunk stuff, but that's all right. I like different genres.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and you're on YouTube as well, yeah?
Yes, I am. I am now on YouTube as of this past month. I'm doing book reviews and discussions on encouraging people to read more diverse and higher quality books, as well as giving people tools to analyze why certain things are working and why other things aren't, and what should be looked at as believable or not. And the thing I really want to highlight is I'm starting actually a book club. You can see there, we're going to be starting with
Wow.
Isaac Asimov's Foundation. It'll be a monthly book club for anyone that wants to join in. And the plan
Okay.
is at the end of the month, or maybe like the first weekend of the next month, we're going to have a big live stream with other independent authors talking about it.
Okay, cool. I haven't read Foundation. I've read iRobot. Um,
The short story collection, it's pretty good. I
yes,
liked iRobot. I didn't really
I
care
liked it a
for
lot.
Foundation, to be honest.
I mean I know of it. It seems like a lot.
For the record, only Foundation, not the whole trilogy. The whole
Yeah.
trilogy would be too much.
Right. Yeah, I got on well with iRobot though. I think
Yeah,
it had a lot of interest. There was a lot of interesting stuff in there, and I liked the two investigators. Um, I forget their names.
yeah. So do I. I
Um,
read iRobot over 10 years ago.
yeah, I mean, I didn't read it that long ago, but it's just I remember them, but I don't remember their names. But their stories, I think, were my favorite ones.
Yeah, for anyone listening right now, I just want to stress that the iRobot books are not the Will Smith movie. The Will Smith
Mm-mm.
movie is not based on iRobot. It's based on a book
No.
called Hardwired, I believe.
Oh.
Completely different. The iRobot short stories are like intellectual mystery puzzles,
Mm.
written by someone who's actually as smart as the characters he's writing about. That's a really common problem with authors. You'll notice that they don't understand what a smart person actually does with their intelligence. But Asimov does, and they're definitely worth your time.
Mm. Okay. I didn't know. See, I didn't realize it was based on a different book because
Yeah, because
there's
they definitely did not tell anybody that.
no. Well, right, yeah, and they have like a couple of characters in the movie that are characters that are in the book
Yes, they name
in the
swapped.
iRobot novels, yeah. Um, and a couple of scenarios that are similar, that I remembered.
Similar air quotes.
Sim Similar-ish, but not yeah, not the same at all. All right, but enough about Isaac Asimov and his wonderful stuff. Um, let's go. Let's get right into 5 to 4.
Sure.
So you mentioned it's not your usual fare.
Yeah, so full disclosure, it's actually based, or it was the primary inspiration was actually a manga that recently got a live action adaptation that was kind of, but a story called Alice in Borderland. I think the
Huh.
premise of that was just so compelling of a couple of friends are having a good time because of some stuff going on. Suddenly, where'd everyone go?
Hmm.
Uh, we're trapped. There's no way out. There's no help. There's strange monsters. People are getting killed, and just taking that as the premise and running with it was just such fertile ground to work with that I really wanted to do something with it. And I do have other ideas what I can do for like a follow-up book that I might do in the future. I just have too much to write right now.
Well, this potential, without spoiling anything, there's a potential for certainly for more and for more stories within that kind of universe that is set up there. Yeah, it's like the idea of like another world, sort of beneath slash parallel to. It's sort of a parallel universe in a way.
Sort of. I
Yeah.
do like to describe it as a nightmare version because obviously the characters in 5 to 4 are stuck in their office.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yes.
it starts at 5 minutes to 4 and their shift ends at 4 and then they can't find the door out.
Mm-hmm.
I think many an office worker has had that feeling of like, why can't I go home? When the
Yep.
time has stopped moving.
A nightmare in and of itself. Yeah. Being stuck in the office.
I'm so
Right.
glad I work from home now.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I typically don't, but it's so I can definitely relate. Yeah. To it's almost there. It's nearly there. Nearly. Not quite yet though. I can't get up and leave, but I want to, but I can't. I've finished everything, but I have to wait for that to just
Yep.
tick over. All right, and it's based on okay. So is it based kind of loosely on Alice in Borderland or?
So I do hesitate to say, oh, I loosely based it on this
Yeah.
because I could say that my second book, Ship of Fools, is loosely based on the Halo universe.
Okay. Oh, so it's like just sort of an inspiration rather than not
Yeah.
really based on, but
Yeah,
yeah.
you like it. The key structure of Alice in Borderland is that it's a setup for death games, and which is a fantastic genre. It's the Squid Game genre, except
Yep.
I think Squid Game is actually a very mediocre version of
Right.
it.
But like Battle Royale and things like that.
Well, that's different too. Death games refer to things like Kaiji or Liar Game or Alice in Borderland or Kakegurui, where it's like high stakes gambling over weird
Oh.
circumstances. Like, there's some trick to these rules, but can they figure out what the trick is and before they die? And that's not really what I did in 5 to 4. 5 to 4 is more explicitly stuck in this like back room space with monsters, and there is a trick to get out. They just have to be able to do it.
Right. And I think yeah, that's where it's at its strongest is where there's that suspense of trying to work out the trick and maybe working out the trick, but also working out the it's tricky to talk about it without getting into specifics. How many
I mean, I think it's
specifics can you
perfectly
go
fair
into?
to say that. So both of us have a tabletop role playing background, right?
Yeah.
This is a big chunk of the book comes directly from tabletop. It's the doppelganger dilemma.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. The party has been copied, and you can't physically tell the difference, and you have to try and figure out who's the real one and who's the fake.
Right.
I tried to turn that into a novel form, and
Mhm.
I also wanted to have a limited character restriction
Mm.
because it made the craft of the book a little more interesting for me. So I
Yeah.
went into it intending it to be 5 people, hence 5 minutes to 4 because it's 1 minute for each person.
Mhm.
Things got a little out of control because then it was like 5 people. Okay, but there's 5 clones. Then there's the people who made the clones, and then there's the monsters, and then there's this. But yeah, so I don't think saying that it is going to spoil anything about the book. I think it's just going to entice people to do it because it's pretty hard to do that satisfyingly in fiction. And I think I did, maybe.
Yeah, well, it's so there's elements of Cube, the old movie Cube. I say old, it's in
Yes,
the
I
90s.
do often compare it to that as well.
Yeah.
Backrooms, Cube, Alice in Borderland.
Yeah, because all the rooms they periodically shift around.
Yep.
So it's difficult to so they're dealing with
That
that.
movie is definitely in my head. It keeps influence even when you wouldn't expect it.
Well, there's that element to it, and then there's the element of there's this monster as well that they're having to deal with. that is hostile, and then there's also these sort of these kind of girls that keep showing up who are like witches, kind of, who aren't really giving it, who are being quite cryptic about everything and kind of screwing with everybody. And then on top of that, they're dealing with copies of themselves that are essentially indistinguishable from the real thing. So they're having to pick.
You can distinguish from them.
An
astute reader can
Yeah.
figure it out faster than the characters.
Right, but it's kind of how they figure it out as well. The kind of the suspense is, how do we figure this out? And also, if we get it wrong, there are going to be massive consequences for the actual person, obviously, because they might get stuck in this kind of nightmare world. So there's a lot going on, and a lot of kind of it's quite like there's clearly defined boundaries and clearly defined rules kind of within that world, which makes it kind of easy to go, okay, it makes it easy to kind of get your head into their situation. And having a limited number of characters, I think is it 5? Yeah, it is 5. Having like the 5 principles, it allows those
there are some
characters
people
to kind of
in
build.
chapter 1 that aren't exactly relevant. They're not really main cast. They're just here's like Seamus.
Yeah.
He's an annoyance in the office, and then they're in the nightmare, and yeah.
And a couple of board members and things as well that kind of pop up. But that first chapter really establishes quite quickly who everyone is and what everyone's deal is, kind of.
Yeah, writing that first chapter was really tricky for me. It went through quite a few revisions with my critique partners because I think I got it to a point where it flows. Everyone gets to have these strong personality introductions. But the problem is the hook is the start of chapter 2.
Right.
And the book is really driven by the hook of they're stuck in the nightmare world. But I was just like, I can't introduce characters. I can't prepare the reader to understand how these characters are behaving in the nightmare if I don't show them normally first. So there's like 12 pages of, to be honest, boring office work. It's just how interesting do you find the character introductions?
Well, it's very efficient in the way it establishes everybody, establishes all the principles, establishes where they are and what they do, which is, I would say, important. Well, so looking back at looking back at that first chapter, having now read it all, it is quite. There's sort of hints as to possibly what's going on, and hints to. I mean, only at the end, maybe. Do I look back at that first chapter and I go, okay, well, that thing just happened, and they're dealing with a similar event that just happened in the office. Okay, that's interesting. And there's like hints to Ed, and you get a clear sense of Lucy as well, which, and you just get all the relationships kind of just sort of together. Of course, we're not introduced to everybody at that point, but we're introduced to most of them. Yeah. And it's quite efficient in its. It sounds. I don't know how complimentary that sounds.
I think it's complimentary. Look, I just said I had to get to the hook as fast as possible, but I had to do things. So I kind of treated it like a screenplay. If you were to adapt this book to film, you would have to have every single one of those scenes. You could not cut any of them. Yeah,
well, that's the thing. There's no fat to trim, which is because it's a quick read. Because you said it was more a novella.
Yeah,
and I don't know how many pages because I read it on my Kindle, so I don't know how many pages it is. I think it's maybe 6 or 7 chapters, I think.
Well, they're not normal chapter breaks.
No,
it is 170 pages.
170. Okay, yeah, because there's the two chapters in the middle. Well, not in the middle, like sort of toward the beginning and the middle that are pretty chunky, and then the rest of them are a bit more sort of slim.
Yeah, so you know the doomsday clock? That
Yeah.
stupid thing about how close are we to nuclear war?
Yes.
I kind of wanted to lean on that in the collective unconscious because the chapter. So there's the first chapter, which is just like during the day or whatever. I labeled it waking.
Yeah.
But the chapters in the nightmare, there's 5 chapters.
Hmm.
Because there's 5 minutes. The chapter breaks are when the clock hand moves
Yeah,
closer.
when it ticks closer. Yeah. Mm.
And the length of the chapters goes down as they get closer and closer because well,
There's more urgency.
their options are getting limited, let's say.
Yeah, limited options and far more urgency. Yeah. Mm.
So that does mean that there is a chapter that's like 70 pages or something.
I think it was. It's either I can't remember if it's 355 or 356 that are the big ones. They're both pretty big.
Yeah, 355 is 60 pages long of a
Yeah.
170 page book.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's where they're kind of figuring everything out in a way,
Yep.
or where they're starting to sort of test the boundaries of well, not test the boundaries, but figure out what the hell's going on, and they're starting to encounter the boundaries of the world.
Yeah,
Mm.
and then they start realizing that, ooh, we need weapons. Ooh, we should not be trusting these people. Ooh.
Yeah, but they're in an office. So where are the weapons? So what weapons do you have in an office building? So it gets it's testing sort of I suppose the innovation of them in a way. And
Yeah,
also
that was a fun challenge for me. I normally write like high fantasy and sci-fi military stuff. And I was like, okay,
mm,
so normal people who don't know how to fight, how do I do this?
right, yeah. Oh yeah, of course. And they're just normal people. So it's it adds that sort of layer. Oh, okay, so these people are in trouble,
Oh yeah.
especially against the monster itself, which is this sort of hulking snake rhino person that apparently has eaten somebody, and the threat of that is pretty is immediately clear.
Have you ever heard of a manga called Blam? Or people think
No,
it's Blame.
no, people think it's blame, but it's actually blam.
Tsutomu Nihei spelled it Blame with an E, but it's supposed to be pronounced Blam like a gunshot.
Oh, okay.
Japanese people make those kinds of English mistakes. Um, it is a fantastic story. It's basically him showing off how cool he can draw decrepit architecture a lot of times. I highly
Okay.
recommend it to anyone passingly interested in manga.
Right.
Don't watch the Netflix adaptation. But it's super heavily influential on me and my aspirations. And one of the things that's going on when the main character is walking through these enormous unknown structures is
Mhm.
every once in a while he just encounters these forgotten, mindless automatons that are just these enormous robots trying to rebuild the crumbling world.
Ooh.
So that's actually the direct reference there that to date nobody has realized.
Hmm. That's a cool concept. I like that. I might look at that manga. Yeah. I
I
don't read
recommend
much
it. I
manga.
have the deluxe editions. They're beautiful. Not
Nice.
much
And
words to read though. It's more of a picture book.
right, right. And don't watch the Netflix adaptation. I feel like don't watch the Netflix adaptation is just like a default at this point for most things.
I can't think of a Netflix adaptation worth watching. So
No, I mean a lot of adaptations are like that. There was a recent one. I don't think it was on Netflix. I think it was on some cable channel somewhere. It was the Will Trent series. Have you heard of this?
I have not.
So Will Trent is like a dyslexic detective, um, written by he's Karen Slaughter, who's it's kind of pulpy,
No, there's
sort
a
of.
last name.
I know, right? It's like pulpy thriller kind of detective stuff
Sounds fun.
set in Atlanta. I mean, I say pulpy. It's one of those book series that's like you get a pretty chunky book and there's loads of them. And he's sort of the central character in most of them. And the adaptation of that story, from what I've seen of the trailers and some clips, because I was like, oh, they're doing this. That's interesting. He's just completely unidentifiable as that character.
Oof.
Like it's just he's like quippy and like making wise cracks about being dyslexic and making like bets with people about how fast he's going to solve the case. And the actual dude in the book is like insecure about being dyslexic, and he's like covered in scars because he was like abused as a kid and he was in foster care, and and he's this completely different character. He's very analytical, and it's just a completely different human being that they've put in the role. And of course, they've made him not white because we can't have we can't have a white person leading a TV show. I'm like, why?
Yeah, what you're seeing is like the metastasizing of the Marvel style of writing.
Yes, like Guardians of the Galaxies, I really like that movie, but
The
I
first
also
one.
yeah, but I hate that movie as well because it's ruined writing up to now.
I think we're gonna
Completely
see a
ruined it.
swing back because everyone is collectively watching Phase Four, or sorry, nobody is watching
No,
Phase
but
Four, but
yeah,
we're seeing Phase Four just be terrible.
yeah,
And I think people are coming to the realization, at least consumers, that always having to make a joke or always having to undercut things with a joke because I have a lot of humor.
yeah.
But there's a slight timing difference between undercutting a scene with humor versus transitioning a scene with humor.
Yes.
Like in my book, the first time they encounter the monster, it does technically end with a joke,
Mm,
but the joke comes after they've gotten away from the monster, and
yeah.
it's to give the reader a breath of they escaped.
Hmm.
Which, when it's that early in the book, come on, you know they escape. So I don't feel bad spoiling that. It's too early for the main characters to get killed off. Um, but Marvel movies will do it like in the middle of fight scenes.
Mm.
It's
It
like,
undercuts the tension completely.
yeah, and that's just incorrect.
Mm. It's one of the things that really frustrates me about those movies and about like basically, I mean, basically every like it's they do it in Star Trek now and they do it in Star Wars and things like that, where you have that moment of humor that where you just know no one is in any danger, or you know there's no threat, or even when you're doing it when there is a threat and you're doing it when people are actually getting killed, and you're undercutting the deaths of characters, and you're just like, why are you doing that?
There are times where that's correct because you're writing like a black heat comedy where
Oh
you're
yeah.
trying to go over the top. Like I'm not going to name anything because maybe I haven't actually read that genre very well, but people know what I'm talking about, I think.
Mm,
I think what happens is when you get these teams of writers,
mm,
they're trying to imitate more successful stories and more successful writers, but they got into these production roles without actually doing the legwork themselves, and they don't really understand what they're doing.
mm.
I think that is the root cause. I think very low of this university to production studio pipeline that seems to exist. Um,
Yes, I mean, I wish it had existed when I was at university because I'd be writing TV now. But
wait, do you have an English major or something?
what I have, so I have a creative writing. I sort of have a joint honors, creative writing and drama, but I've got an MA in television script writing, a master's. So, I mean, I got it in just the wrong time, maybe. But also, I mean, it's one of those things where if I had been sort of launched into, if somehow I'd been launched into kind of TV at that point, I'd have probably been terrible because you need to. I found that there's two things that make a good writer. There's very few good writers that are young and who just have fire in them. You have to have learned something. You have to have lived a bit in order to properly write and articulate stuff. And you have to have been writing for a long time in
Yes.
order for that to be a thing.
Sometimes you get people who have no life experience, but have written a 5 million word web novel about becoming God or something.
Yeah.
And then the other end of the spectrum is people that have lived a bunch and then think they can just dash down their memoir and it'll be a bestseller.
True. Yeah. I mean, there's the other side of it. Definitely. If you've lived a lot, but you haven't put the hours in to be a writer. You've just lived a bunch. And it's hitting that medium of just living your life and also trying to actually be good at what you're doing. And it's yeah, there's that sweet spot. Eventually people get there, but it's difficult. And I guess it depends on what you're writing as well. Because it's always best to kind of write what you know. Or what you can research, I suppose.
Yeah, I maybe do too much research. I know way too many science facts. My background, I didn't get an English degree. I got an engineering degree. That's pretty much why I write so much science fiction. When you go to, if you actually pick apart the technology I put in my stories, let's ignore Infinite Money Glitch. That's a comedy. Artificial intelligence does not work like that, if you know anything about it. But like my cyberpunk stuff, it almost isn't science fiction. Everything in that city could be, if you had a check big enough, there would be no innovation needed whatsoever. You could build that city today. The only reason it's 100 years in the future is because of how big the city is and how long it takes to build skyscrapers.
Okay, so let's return to the website real quick and let's have a look at some of these. So, okay, so we have Ship of Fools, we have Faceless Bastion, a Faceless Bastion, I guess.
The series, so the way I had that set up is supposed to be like the way computer folders are set up, where it's Bastion is the setting, Blackstone is the character, so it's like a folder inside that setting. Because I'm gonna do stuff from other characters in that eventually. Right now, I'm trying to treat that series like the Dresden Files. It's like the Dresden Files meets Ghost in the Shell.
Oh, okay, cool. Oh, okay. So that's more cyberpunk, I guess. And then Ship of Fools
is 1,000 years in the future, when mankind has spread between planets and colonized and terraforming, and it starts right after the big Core Alliance versus the Colonies war. And the main character is a super soldier, basically in hiding because the inner planet's Earth lost the war. And he worked for them, and he's now being hunted by the new government.
Interesting. Okay.
That is often gets compared to Mutiny on the Bounty, because they're on a refugee ship that needs to hide for pickup because they don't have faster than light capability. They have no weapons. They have nothing to protect them against this basically mercenary force that just blew up their space station. All they can do is keep the power low and float in deep space. And at some point, they have to turn on the distress beacon.
Right.
So, and it is the decision of the captain when that happens, because if they need to turn on the distress when friendlies will come pick them up. And the captain has to make the decision, is that ship a friendly or are they going to nuke us?
Right.
And when you have 1,000 people kind of in the dark, kind of
Mm.
not trusting the captain, kind of running out of food, uh,
Mm.
hell breaks out on the ship.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, very good. Okay. That sounds good. Yeah, I need to look at that. All right. So yeah, it's just post-war, that book.
Yeah.
Post-war in universe.
Um. So sort of actually, it's the way. It's gotta take some inspiration from the Middle East, where yes, the peace treaty has been signed. Why are those? Why is that tribe still attacking us?
Right.
I thought
Okay.
we signed peace. Why are they still sending missiles?
Right. Okay. Okay. Because I've sort of in a similar way. I've got so my novella series that I have at the moment, which is Kodiak, which I can show here somewhere. Maybe here. Let's scroll up because they're all there. So the novella series I have at the moment, Kodiak, that is set during a war, and it will at some well, I don't want to. I'm planning for it maybe to go post-war, but we'll see how it looks. And
Beautiful.
those are all like 200 and well, they tend to be between 8 to 10 chapters, and they're sort of between 100 and 130 pages. Um, and I like the idea of having that sort of interstellar conflict, but also what are we supposed to do after, and how do we move on from it? And I don't see that story very often in science fiction, and I don't know why, because it seems like a very very interesting path to take.
So I think that is driven by market forces. Basically, the people that buy into that are typically there for the action.
Yeah.
And if you conclude the war, your reader's going to go, "Oh, no more action. Book done.
Right.
Bye." Um, so have to you'd have to either prepare the audience that this is going to be character driven stuff. You could do it more like a space opera,
Mm.
which you probably, if you start looking for space operas instead of sci-fi military, you'd probably find what you're looking for.
Mm.
Would you find it well written? That's another question,
That's
because
another question.
that's something an indie author is going to be doing, not trad pub.
Right. Well, it's another one of it's something that I haven't even seen in something more quote unquote highbrow, like I guess Star Trek is, somewhere around there. I've not seen that in Star
What about
Trek,
the
really.
Expanse? I'm only 2 books into the Expanse, but
Hmm.
I
I
think
haven't.
it kind of plays into that, because the Expanse has like war flare ups and then dies
Yeah.
down, then flare up and dies down.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, The Expanse. I haven't read The Expanse. I've seen some of The Expanse. I think I've seen like the
I hear it's
first
a good
season and a
faithful
bit.
adaptation.
Yeah, I from what I've heard, yeah, it's good for a while and then it gets a bit worse. Um, but I don't really know. But it's one of those things like it seems like it'd be right up Star Trek's alley. Like the kind of thing where you have this massive conflict and then you're like, okay, now we're done. We're gonna have to go back to being sort of we're gonna have to try and go back to being peaceful and diplomatic. And we've got a bunch of people who are probably traumatized from this war. So we're having to deal with that. And probably still there's some tension between us and this enemy that we've been fighting. So how do we deal with it? How do we how do we collectively move forward? And yeah, it's a tricky one. I think it's probably too tricky for mainstream. I think that's probably why it's not been done, or at least been done to that degree. Um, but like I would never expect it. I would never expect it in something like Star Wars, for example. I've really soured on Star Wars as an IP. I don't know
Well,
about
that's because I hate to break it to you, but it was always bad.
Well, I don't know if it was always bad. It was all. I think the more of it you make, the more that universe just kind of breaks.
Yeah, so the original trilogy was a spectacle, and it was just like a rock solid hero's journey repeated, like
Mm.
iterated to completion, right?
Yeah, it's a fun adventure. Yeah.
Yeah, but when you start looking at things like there's no such thing as paper in the Star Wars universe. There are no wheels in the Star Wars universe. Every planet is this multi-alien hodpodge mess where
Yeah.
you can't even tell where anyone's from because everyone just has a different set of rubber things glued to their face.
There are wheels.
No, no, there are no wheels in Star Wars. It
There are
is
in the
George
prequels.
Lucas's
There are
design.
wheels. In the prequels, there are wheels.
I don't think you'll find them.
I remember wheels. I I remember wheels existing in the prequels. And
Everything
like
is jet
twice.
flyers.
There's two wheels. I remember. Yeah, I remember there being a droid that had. It was like a droid tank, and it had two wheels, and it had a bunch of rockets on it. That might be the only thing with wheels.
Yeah, but it just has these bizarre design considerations and constraints to give it the Star Wars feel. But they were literally just, we're going to do this to make it look different. And Lucas did not think out, does this even make sense?
Right.
Because it's just an aesthetic. It was originally an aesthetic to fluff up the hero's journey. And then when they start trying to expand it and they start bringing in like galactic politics and let's work in a Western, the aesthetic stops working for those other genres because you're seeing enough of it. They start going like, really? How are the Hutts in charge? How?
Of like gangsters and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the thing is like the more of it you it's like Warhammer 40,000 but for kids because it's this constant war. Like there's no like there's like I think there's like one movie where there's peace for a bit, but and that's like I think the first prequel. But aside from that, there's always conflict all the time, all the time, all the time, all the time, and it's just exhausting.
So a fellow by the name of Carl Benjamin put together a pretty comprehensive argument that the Jedis are the bad guys, that the movies are carefully cultivated propaganda, because there's a lot of things of like the Jedi were in charge before Palpatine seized democratic control. And there was slavery and poverty and everything, and like caste systems and just chaos when the Jedi were allegedly in control. And then they go, "Oh, but the Sith are so evil." What do the Sith do? Do they enslave people? Do they wage
Yeah.
wars? Do they conscript child soldiers? All these things.
Yeah. Do they take children away to be put in a temple and raised in a temple? Yeah, it's it. I feel like they consciously limit their own. I mean, at least in the movies, they constantly and the TV series now, I guess they consciously limit their own universe to try and keep it as not broken as they can. But it is broken. It is just broken. Like you can't. I've always wanted to see from start, and they'll never do it because they just can't at this point. I would love to see like a Sith movie or a Stormtrooper movie, just something from the perspective of the Empire, just to see what's going on there.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's
It'll
another
never
thing. It's
happen.
like, who is funding the Death Star? How much taxes are they collecting? How is there not revolt on every level?
All of the taxes, I suspect, all of the taxes.
But like that's the thing with Empire is like there's a fair argument to be made that America for the last 50 years was a global empire. Guess what? Americans were happy with America during that time. There was no revolt against the American government of scale. And that is why we were able to fund the world's largest military 5 times over.
Mm,
So you kind of have to map that onto the Sith Empire of, well, you know what? The average person was probably fine with
yeah.
billions of clone soldiers keeping the other people away or whatever they were fighting with the clone soldiers.
Mm. Oh yeah. Well, yeah, they were like, yeah, they were the heroes, I suppose, weren't they? Like in that period where you have the clones fighting I think it's the droids they're fighting.
Yeah, who
The
was making the droids?
separatists.
I don't even remember.
The separatists were making the droids who wanted to separate from the Republic. I guess because the Republic was corrupt and garbage.
So to change slightly, George R. R. Martin there's a lot of things to complain about that man.
Yes.
Uh, but he does make a fair point of, oh, so this guy that's trying to be king, is he actually a good king? What's his
Yeah.
tax structure? What's his, how is he planning to keep peace with the neighbors? How is he going
Yes.
to divvy up the nobles so there isn't border wars and so on?
Yeah.
Like
How is
that's actually a fair
yeah.
point.
Is this hero figure actually going to be a good leader? Yeah. And you have that with people like Robb Stark and well, Robert Baratheon as well, like the king in the first book, who is
The one that dies.
yeah,
What's
who was a
he?
hero, who was like a hero,
Yeah, he was a
but
war hero, and I think he's supposed to be like he was like okay as a king. I think is the conclusion.
yeah, he was like fine, but he was in debt. He was getting the kingdom in debt to all these people who are
Oh,
going to
every
be
kingdom
like
ends up in
crazy.
debt.
Yeah, and he was like a drunkard and all that, and with Robb Stark, who's meant to be the hero, and he makes a massive critical error, which leads to his own death and his mother's death, and like his army being decimated. And
Well, that's because in
yeah,
the world of Song and Ice and Fire, everyone is evil.
yes, well, everyone is, yeah, everyone is, yes, everyone's basically,
Yeah, well, early on there are good people like Ned, but
mm,
the he quickly establishes the good people get killed.
yeah. Well, you have people like John, who's I wouldn't say John is evil. He's sort of naive, but he gets his like he's sort of learning the world and he's learning to be a bit more ruthless, I suppose, and be a bit more I don't know, a bit he makes mistakes though. I mean, the last book ended with him getting shanked by the Night's Watch.
Oh yeah, that is where that left off, isn't it? There's
Yeah.
actually such a big divergence between the books and the show.
Mm.
They cut so many plot lines in order to wrap up the show poorly.
Yes. Yes, they did. In order to wrap it up. Well, I this is I don't know. I think that's where they have it ending in the show is how the books are going to end. I'm pretty sure that's how they're going to end. And
Are they
they're
going to
better.
end?
Well, they're not going to end really, but because he'll die before he makes the. He's got two
I've got
more
a
to write, hasn't
conspiracy
he?
theory. Everyone listening, you need to tune into my YouTube channel because I'm going to put up a video next week about my conspiracy on. I think he has already written Winds of Winter.
Oh,
I think he's just
well.
hoarding it for reasons I'll get into.
I feel like what he's done. I think he's seen the story told now, and he's gone. Fuck. Oh no, that's how it ends, and that's how people have received it. Oh dear, that's a problem because the fundamental issues in season 8 of Game of Thrones are mostly character based. Well, and they're the same. I don't think they set it up in the same. They definitely didn't set it up in the same way that the books have. Like Daenerys' kind of heel turn in season 8, where she becomes Hitler.
Oh, becomes she was always a terrible leader.
But it's set up way better. In she was always a little bit like she was always a bit of a wrong one. That it's set up way better in the books,
Yeah,
that she is
honestly,
definitely going to be
I struggle
that.
to remember what was show plot line versus book plot line. They're a little blurred in my head, but when she made herself dictator over in the other continent,
In Marine,
because
yeah.
I saved these slaves, and then the way that she was managing that,
Yeah.
that's actually one of my big complaints of the series is every time that she is put in charge of governing people, she has led to mass famine, war, revolt, and genocide.
Yeah.
Every time. And
Yeah.
yet people want to fight to put her on the Iron Throne.
Mm.
Why? She has a track record of getting everyone who supports her killed.
Mm. Yeah. I think in the books they have it. There are some mitigating. No, because she does something in one city that kind of it causes there to be a plague.
Yep.
I don't. Yeah, she causes a
Well,
plague
yeah,
to
it's
happen,
her immigration policy.
and the plague just like sweeps across, and it comes to Marine, and they're all outside Marine, but she wants to bring them into the. I don't think she does end up. I can't remember if she ends up bringing them in or not.
I
The
think
plague gets into Marine though
I think
somehow.
it's something like there is a plague camp outside the walls, and then a
Yes.
fire breaks out, and they
Mm,
evacuate.
right.
And the city is just left to die.
Mm. Yes, because right, yeah, because a dragon starts. Yeah, a dragon starts the fire, and she escapes on the dragon, and then has a trip in a field.
Yeah,
It's a
so
very odd
the
book.
issue with the Song of Ice and Fire is the characters can evolve, but they can only get worse. That's the only character growth that's allowed is make them worse.
Right.
There is no redemption in Gurm's mind. There is no improvement. There is no salvation.
It's a very it's too nihilistic a series, I think, for its own good.
It's disturbingly common how often writers seem to think it's correct to have the bad ending.
Yeah. Um yeah. Well, I mean the way it ends in the way it ends in season 8 of Game of Thrones is I mean it is a it's not even it's not a bittersweet ending, it's just a bitter ending.
Yep.
There's no sense of like the good guys win. It's like the
It's
the
some people survived.
one good guy became Hitler, another one was basically was just thrown to the wolves for killing Hitler, and everyone in charge of the slime ball. And the actual person in charge is just a puppet. And it's like, oh,
So when you were on my website earlier, you may have seen my fantasy series, The Undying Emperor.
I may have. Well, we can see it now. Where are we? The
That's
Undying
my
Emperor.
attempt at a grand, 5 million word story that I'm working on.
Mm,
Uh, yeah, the that I published that on a site called Royal Road, which is filled with teenagers and anime fans. So the artwork represents that.
right.
It was designed for market.
Yeah.
Um, I try the scale of that story is supposed to be one kid and his mentor start from literally nothing and conquer the world.
Ooh. Okay.
Well, he makes use of existing structures because like the first thing that has to happen after he gets like trained and he's like he's as educated as a noble, he's a master swordsman, and he has a bit of magic.
Mm,
Is he steals someone else's identity?
okay.
And it's supposed to be based on Napoleon. And obviously, conquering the world means building an army and subjugating other people and conglomerating them, then levying their forces and continuing the wars and smashing out the religions and killing demons and gods and so on and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But it does not require it to be, and then everyone dies.
Mm,
Like if you actually look at how medieval economies work, like the military even in the most dire of times, is like 5% of your population, basically. So
Mhm.
even if your entire military gets wiped out, that's 1 in 20 people. All the
Mm.
farmers still need to be there, still need to be harvesting crops, still need to be managing the textiles and the imports and the shipping and all that stuff. Is just like
Mm.
the,
Well,
the
that's the
world is still improving as, okay, the Roman method. You send your army out to build the roads to the people that you're conquering. Then afterwards, you have all this road infrastructure so that people can get around easier.
mm. Well, it's one of those things in A Song of Ice and Fire that's it's very fictionally effective in terms of tension because you have all of these bad things happen to everybody, so they can happen to anybody. So there's a lot of tension there when you're following a person. So well, they could die in this chapter. Like you don't know if, especially if they're like, we have to go from here we have to go from this city to this city to deliver a message that's vitally important. Well, we know that things rarely work out in this world, so there could be a point where they all just get killed and the message never gets there. And it's like, oh, and then we're gonna have to deal with that somehow. And
Yeah,
I
but
think that's
Martin
effective,
doesn't understand the scale of the disasters he causes. If you
right?
tally up how many people are conscripted and killed in these fights, there'd be no one alive in Westeros.
It's in the tens, it's in the tens of thousands, and then it goes up to like the hundreds of thousands at a certain point, like the size of the forces and the way they just sweep across. And it's just like, oh yeah, just burn all these farmers' fields. Just do it. It's like, well, hang on. You have to live in this country. Why are you burning all of the stuff? Why are you
Oh,
burning
who
all
cares
your
about the
own
little people? Let
food?
them starve.
Yeah, exactly. It's just stupid. Yeah. I think it's like a way of it's like a really easy and very basic way to go classism and not a way to go like, oh, hang on, wait a minute. Um, this isn't this a terrible idea? And having it be so bitter, having there being no, I don't think I'll pick up Winds of Winter if and when it comes out.
I won't either. I have no interest in it.
Yeah, well, I know how basically there's two factors to it. One, I know how the story ends because it's going to end the same way, and two, it's just like the last book of the last two books were just such a slog of hopelessness. There's just no point in
So, do
reading
you
them.
read much epic fantasy?
I mean, I write epic fantasy, and I read a fair
But
bit
do
of
you
epic
read it?
fantasy. I read a fair bit of epic fantasy.
Uh, how about Brandon Sanderson? Are you keeping up on The Way of Kings?
Not at all. No,
Okay.
I have.
Wheel of Time?
There's one right over here. I know that's Patrick Rothfuss. It's what a Name of the Wind on my. I'm squinting at it because it's on my bedside table. I think it's the Name of the Wind, and I have more of them. I have more of them downstairs. I haven't actually started reading any of his stuff.
So the reason I bring those up is I think they're the three big examples of large cast epic fantasies
Mm,
that pull the story away from the characters that you actually like
right,
and force the reader to read about insufferable bitches.
right.
And it's just like, dude, why is like Wheel of Time, great example. I love the three guys, Rand, and Perrin.
Mm,
But you get to like book 5, and they're like 1 out of 4 chapters. It's
mm.
oh, you have to read about the freaking Aes Sedai, even though Robert Jordan can't write a woman to save his life. Oh my god! And Brandon Sanderson, in my opinion, screwed it up as well because I only like Dalinar.
Mm.
He got it in his head that it would be really deep to give every single one of his main characters PTSD or dissociative identity disorder or you name it. They all have mental illness. It's just like, okay, well, congrats. I used to like Kaladin. I don't like him anymore. I don't want to read these chapters of him collapsing in the street because he's so exhausted from fighting. Because apparently he got nerfed.
Yeah.
The other thing that pissed me off Way of Kings was like he's supposed to be this super soldier, and then just new people show up and he's getting his ass kicked.
Hmm.
All of the progression got reset.
Mm. Well, viewer, if this also annoys you, they have Epic Fantasy right there. The Four Guardians series, which I I'm allergic right now, I think, to the nihilistic storytelling of Martin and these kind of things. I want it's very important to me to get the characters right first before, I mean, even before maybe even the world. Get your principles right. Work out what they are, work out their motivations, and from there stick with it. Like have those people interact and have those people be kind of proactive, and even also do this with your villains. Make them entertaining to read and give them a purpose, I suppose. Like, because in their own mind, what they're doing is the right thing to do, and they have their own motivations, and they have their own sort of well, I guess yeah, motivations.
Would you
And
believe me if I said I don't know how to write villains? Like empirically, I don't know how to do it because not one of my stories has like this is the bad guy.
I
Even my crime fiction, I have like, okay, this is the criminal,
hmm,
but they're not the villain.
I think well, a villain can be really boring. I mean, it can be like very boring, but very like it's difficult to sort of articulate.
Well, you just read 5 to 4. You know who there is a character that you know I'm referring to when I
Yes,
say the villain.
yes.
I think everyone who reads the book will be like, oh yeah,
Hmm,
uh, definitely not the good guy. But
right.
even then, you understand what he's doing and why he's motivated and how he's doing it, and he's rational and all that.
Hmm. Well, it's very
Probably shouldn't have
understandable.
given away that it's a he.
Well, it's an understandable motivation to kind of it's it's a sim well, I mean, yeah, to a degree, it's a sympathetic motivation. It's an understandable motivation of why
Yeah,
the
I think it's
characters.
understandable, not quite sympathetic. There needs to be a difference there. Sympathy is like, oh, I'm evil because I was abused as a child, which is the tabula rasa Marxist idea of people are products of their circumstances. And
Well, it's sympathetic in the sense that the villain is in the same situation as the heroes, or the antagonist is in the same situation as the protagonists. So it's, I suppose, I mean, okay, I suppose that's more on the understandable side
yep.
than the sympathetic side.
So like Ship of Fools, you could argue that most of the characters are the villain,
Right,
because it's multiple mutinies occur, and
right.
every time someone seizes power, things get worse. That's the structure of the story.
Mm,
But they always have justifications. They're always saying like, "Oh, the current government is screwing up for this reasons. We need to do this instead, or we're going to die.
mhm,
I'll be better," and then they turn out to not be better.
mm. Well, there's this sort of subset of villain that is like I am bad and evil and I love it, which is entertaining, but not necessarily anything beyond surface level. Whereas a like a villain in a longer term story, you need to know exactly why. Even if their plans are grandiose, they need to be like logical, and they need to be like understandable, and you need to be able to see from their point of view. Not necessarily agree with it, but you need to be able to see from their point of view. And maybe have like some protagonists sort of agree in principle, with the motivation and be like, okay, I get you, but what you're doing is not the way to get what you want. And that type of thing is more effective in a story that isn't so nihilistic. Like, I don't think you'd ever see that in a Song of Ice and Fire, because everyone is evil in
Yeah,
a Song of Ice and
yeah,
Fire.
definitely not. I think the entire story gets defined by Littlefinger, where he says chaos is a ladder.
Right.
I'd rather be king of the ashes. I think he was the mouthpiece for what every character is doing. One thing I'm trying to build to, though, with my writing is actually in my cyberpunk setting, because the way I structured it. By the way, did you watch the anime Cyberpunk Edgerunners?
No, I've heard I heard a lot about it. I want to watch it, but I haven't gotten around to watching it yet.
So I call Cyberpunk Edgerunners a 9 out of 10 anime because it had 9 episodes that were 10 out of 10, and then the last episode was a 0 out of 10. It goes
Okay.
for the doomer, nihilist, everything is awful ending. And I don't want to do that with my writing. But I also don't want to completely abandon what makes the cyberpunk genre and the tech-noir stuff so compelling. And I try to layer that into my detective series, Faceless being the first one. My next, by the way, I have a new book coming out as soon as I get cover art finished called Gamma Coin. That's going to be coming out later this summer. It's the sequel.
Okay.
What I try to do is there's always layers to things being interacted, where the story is tracking like character to character. It's Detective Blackstone is trying to get this criminal. But okay, Detective Blackstone is part of the government because he works for the military police, because there's no local police department. There's private security forces and the military in this setting. He's part of them. And the criminal is part of an organization, and then but like above the beat cops that show up to enforce the law, there's like direction setting organizations like Homeland Security kind of stuff, and above these criminal organizations, there's the people funding them, and conflict is actually occurring at all scales. But you lose the ability to understand who's doing what as things go up, and every once in a while, the draft administration says, hey, these people are endangering our ability to recruit soldiers. Destroy them.
Right.
And for almost incomprehensible motivations to the character level, slaughters everyone. And it can seem like injustice and powerlessness, and people are just cogs in the machine. But I still try to bring it down to, but does the character-to-character conflict come to a satisfying resolution? And are the people involved trying to be better generally? Because Blackstone is always trying to do the right thing. He's trying to get justice. He wants to help people. He wants to do the right thing, be the hero. But it's this kind of horrible, like, meta-layered cyberpunk setting where bad stuff still happens.
And I suppose like that sort of grander evil happening has a purpose. It's just a purpose that's, well, I don't know. Is it something you're planning to kind of reveal to the characters?
Yeah. So take me at my word when I say there's a purpose for this. But here's the example that'll come up in actually the third book, which I have drafted but not edited, where there's a facility called the Sigurd Chemical Plant that it is its protection is a matter of national security. So everyone, they don't explain why it's a matter of national security, because it makes acid. Like it makes acid and fertilizer and stuff, and it's like completely normal chemicals.
Someone's
but
got to
they
make
sell them to the government, and the government needs to buy them for reasons I'll explain later. So when riots show up at that plant because like pay us more money, like you need to tell us more information, like typical things people riot about. It's like that specific plant, they just kill people.
Right.
Which just stokes the injustice, the resentment against the government. But if you knew what the government knew, you might agree with, just gun them down. We cannot risk this.
Right. And kind of circling back on that question, like motivation, circling back around to 5 to 4. one thing, and I don't know this. I don't know if this is a spoiler. It's probably not. The why of it all, I think, is not answered in 5 to 4. Is it something you're planning to get into?
If I were to do another book, it would be I would retroactively explain it a bit better. Let's say that.
Yeah. Well, the
It's
thing
kind of
about
just posed as this is the way it is.
yeah, well, that's the thing about the why. You don't always need the why. I mean, there are certain there are certain um stories where the why would sort of take away some of the horror, I suppose. Like Lovecraft, the
Yeah,
why is
that's a
not
big thing of
needed in
horror.
Lovecraft.
As soon as you understand that Cthulhu is just an alien,
Yeah,
you kind of ask, well, okay, yeah, let's ram a battleship into his face and shoot him. Like he
right.
stops being scary. Like if you understand it, it moves from the domain of darkness and confusion and chaos to here
Hmm.
is a problem that humans can solve because we're very intelligent, actually.
Hmm.
Believe it or not, humans are pretty smart.
Mm.
So if
Yeah.
you want to write an action piece where what you do is you make the problems be understood, and maybe it's the building's
Mm.
on fire, people understand how to escape a burning building. But if people are just randomly falling over dead in the building, and it's instead of like smoke inhalation or something, you don't know how to tackle that problem. That's how you get scared of it. Is like, oh my god, the security guard just touched Rick Sanchez and he just fell over dead. How?
Hmm.
It's inexplicable. Like people are afraid of inexplicable death. They're not afraid
Hmm.
of getting shot by a gun in the same way.
Mm. Well, inexplicable. Yeah, well, inexplicable anything, I suppose, in like a horror setting.
I'm sorry, did I just make a reference that you didn't get? Do you watch Rick and Morty?
No.
Ooh.
I've seen
Yeah,
some
that
Rick
was
and
that was a
Morty.
reference to Rick and Morty scene where literally Secret Service touches him and just falls over dead. And it's like, yeah, people are scared of unexplainable death.
Well, I mean, it's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, unexplainable, yeah, unknowable and unexplainable. And there's that element of unknowable in 5 to 4. And I suppose the explanation is not really, I mean, for that story, it's not really prescient. It's not really necessary. It's
Well,
just like
there's a
this is the
line in
problem,
there.
and we've got to get out of it.
There's a blink and you miss it line where one of the girls says basically like, I could explain this to you, but the time it would take for you to actually understand what I'm saying would be
Mm.
longer than your lifetime.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean,
And
in
that's
that
how I try
instance,
to
they.
approach that is like he there I wanted there to be, yes, the reader will acknowledge that there probably is a logic. There is something that could be understood, but
Mm.
because of the characters, the plots, the motivations, the things that have to happen,
Mm.
that's simply not important to get.
Yeah, there's a time crunch. So, I mean, they're both there. Well, yeah, there's a time crunch, and it's not based on linear time. It's based on what other people are doing. So there's you because the time could move forward at any point
Yep.
if you're not around the other people. So it's yeah. All right. Brilliant. Okay. Well, I would recommend it because it's
Thank you.
yeah, it is yeah, it's a solid like tension page turner. And it is a pretty quick read. Good characters, lots of tension, well set up world. And it leaves the possibility of more. I would imagine that it would be interconnected. I don't imagine I'll see those characters again, like the principals. I imagine I won't see them again. I would imagine it would be different stories, but who
Maybe
knows? Maybe, who knows?
maybe
Yeah,
once he's been to the suspension space, it's easier to go back.
Maybe so. Maybe so. Who knows? You know, but I don't know. We'll see. I'll find out at some point. All right.
Yeah, give me
So
a follow. My goal is to publish 100 novels. I've so far published 4, if you don't, maybe 12 if you count my free stuff.
yeah, okay. All right. So you're okay. Nice. About a ninth of the way there. A ninth?
A 20th.
A 20th? Well, I'm including the free stuff.
Oh, including the free stuff. If you include the free stuff, I'll be there. I'll hit 100 like next year.
Tomorrow. Yeah. All right. So on that note, then where can people find you? Where can people get in touch, etc.?
I'm at James Krake on YouTube. I'm putting up videos about the books I read and the analysis. And like I mentioned at the beginning, that we got the book club now. You can follow me on Twitter at Krake James. I had switched the order there. You can go to my website for very inconsistent posting about the books I've released. That is jameskrake.com. And from there, you can get the links to finding me on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or Royal Road or whatever. My books are everywhere.
Awesome. All right. Well, you can find me here, obviously, at this YouTube channel. You can find me at Matt Waterhouse Author on Minds. You can find me at where is it? Here. Well, you can find the books here on Amazon. The many books. Screen share is loading. There it is. You can find the many books, sci-fi and fantasy, novellas and larger stuff, and also on Substack for much shorter stuff. So mattwaterhouse.substack.com. We've got Deadland there, which is a collection of short stories in the zombie apocalypse. We have novel extracts.
Ooh, you also do zombie stuff?
Oh yeah.
Ooh, I got a zombie novella that's gonna come out end of this year.
Nice. All right, we've got potentially a new thing that's going to go up on Substack entirely, or it's going to go up. Bits of it are going to go up and then it'll be released. I haven't decided yet. But the Shattered Lands, that's what that is. Same universe as Streets of Mir. And there's also some travel writing, which is going to take place once I get to this country, Kyrgyzstan, which is going to be in July. All right, so without further ado, James, been good to meet you.
Likewise.
All right, and pick up 5 to 4, definitely. And I will see you all next time.